Call me a hater, but I really did not expect this new Zeos collab to sound this damn good. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and today we're taking a look at this, the new Juzear x Z Reviews Defiant, which is, as I've mentioned, a collaboration with one Zeos Pantera, who is known for a lot of things, but frankly, I didn't think he would be known for surprisingly well-tuned IEMs, but that's what we've got here with the Defiant. How well-tuned, how good does it actually sound? Well, we're going to talk about it. And what this is a hybrid set. It's got a dynamic driver, 3 balanced armatures, and actually a pretty competitive price of $99.99 US. Basically, it's $100, but it's a little bit under $100. And that's important for me just because, like, the number of hybrid IEMs under $100 that I would recommend is really, really small. But this is one of them, and we're going to talk about exactly why. Before we get into that, a quick shout out to Hi-Fi Go for sending this IEM in for review. If you want to check it out, I've got them linked in the description down below. But with that said, we're going to stay here at the table. We're going to talk about what you get inside the box of the Defiant, talk about the build quality, fit and comfort, all that stuff. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the sound and talk about a comparison versus another IEM, another hybrid set at a close price range, not quite as cheap, but pretty close, that I think you should also be considering if you're considering buying the Defiant. So with that said, here's the packaging. It's got the IEM on the outside. It's frankly a little bit dark. It's got some branding on it it's a little bit hard to see. I know it's blurry because my camera doesn't focus in real time, but there's the box, and here's what you get inside of it. Let's start with this real quick, which is a nice little carry case. It's actually got kind of a premium finish of all the fake leather finishes. This one's actually pretty compelling and convincing. And it's got a zip, and it's also a little bit on the tall side, as you can see. So it's not exactly pocketable, but it is otherwise kind of a nice size. So I am actually in approval of this little carry case. As you can see, it's got a little pocket there for storage, and you can see the plethora of ear tips that come inside, which I suppose we can talk about next. So it does come with 3 different sets of ear tips. It comes with a set of foam ear tips here, as well as 2 different styles of silicone ear tips, which I like to see. I keep talking about this, and it's nice to see more manufacturers including multiple styles of silicone ear tips, because getting the right fit is super important, and having different sizes of ear tips is important, but maybe even just as important is having different shapes of ear tips, right? So you can see that this one over here on the left is a little bit of a taller, more domey, or sorry, more like bulbous shape, whereas the one over here on the right is a little bit on the short side as I drop it, and a little bit more domey. So, you know, you get a little bit of option in the fit, so you can find out what works for you exactly. And I'll talk about what the fit is and stuff in a little bit. But I guess I'll also highlight this. You get a Z Reviews stand, little logo, like it stands up like that. Like that's cute. I'm gonna have to get Zeos to sign mine or something like that. But apart from that, you do get, well, the IEM itself. And we're gonna talk about the build quality on this IEM, starting with the cable, which does have a feature that I haven't quite highlighted yet, which is, of course, it's got swappable terminations. And it's got the mechanism that I think is actually the best mechanism, where you've got a little screw hold down there, it pops off, and then you can plug in a balance connector if that is your preference. Why I like this is because it's nice and small and compact. It doesn't really add any bulk to the usual 3.5mm termination. And then I like the screw because it's a little bit more secure than some of the other connectors that just plug on and hold on with friction. So that's pretty nice. But the rest of the cable is actually also really, really nice, apart from one factor, which is, I guess, going to be up to taste, but I don't really like the color. It comes in, this is like kind of Z's thing, right? It's doing this alternating blue and red, which is kind of a cool aesthetic in some cases, in some applications. Like, I like it in the cost context. But here in this cable, I don't know. It looks a little candy cane, but it's not too bad. Mostly it's bad because I frankly picked the wrong color of earpieces, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the cable is otherwise, apart from the color, a really nicely behaving cable. It's just like a pretty simple 2-core wind up at the bottom, and then at the Y-split, you've got a pretty small Y-split, and then it breaks into 2 just kind of single core pieces that in a lot of other IEMs, or sorry, a lot of other cables that have similar construction, sometimes like the top half where it's just single ends up being a little bit kink prone and kind of gnarly. this is actually really, really well behaved. So I am pretty happy with this. It's even got a functional chin slider that stays in place. Like that has got a lot of friction on it, which I dig. Now up top, you've got your standard preformed ear hooks and your standard 2-pin connectors. So you can swap that out with another IM cable if you choose. You can see that the connector on this thing is not protruded. So it may not fit into every IM, but should fit into most, including, you know, the Juzear. And if you're looking for a cable that'll fit into this one, well, there's no recess there. So if you're using a protruded cable, oh my gosh, let's see if I can figure this out with my ailing vision. Sorry, I was saying if you're using with a protruded cable, it's just going to be a little bit taller. But anyway, nice cable generally. Like I'll give it the rotary wrap so you can kind of see just how well this thing behaves. But I'm pretty into the cable apart from the aesthetic. And again, the aesthetic of the cable would actually be a much better match for the other color option that the Defiant comes in. So they asked me if I wanted one that looked a little bit, not quite rainbow colored, but it kind of looked a little bit more like your traditional abalone shell, right? A little bit of like purple and pink in the coloration, or if I wanted green. And I just don't have a lot of green IEMs. So I was like, oh, send me the green one. But I think on this particular cable, the other colorway would have looked a lot better because here the green and the candy cane is a little bit of a clash. But otherwise, I think the aesthetic here on the earpieces is pretty nice. It's unique, and it's got like this interesting like bird insignia on the outside of it, which is cool. And then over here on the right side, you've got a more traditional Juzear branding where you've got this, I don't know what's going on with this pattern here. I feel like I've seen something similar on some of their other IEMs, but then you've got their logo here. And I like that it's not entirely uniform, which is something I like. I don't know, I just like the earpieces that are a little bit asymmetrical, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. And I didn't actually even notice this until just now, but there is a Defiant logo on the bottom with, the word Defiant and the Z Reviews logo on the bottom, which is pretty cool. Apart from that, the earpieces themselves, like these are actually pretty nicely made for a sub $100 IM, but they are, you know, an acrylic plastic. They've got a decent bit of weight to them, so they don't feel super hollow and cheap like sometimes you do get with this style of design. But the one thing I will say is that the earpieces themselves are not super like semi-custom molded, right? They're not super semi-custom molded. That's a weird way to say this. Basically, a lot of these earpieces that I try that have like this semi-custom molded design. In fact, here, let me pull this one in as an example. The Softears Studio 2, which review will be coming soon on this. There's just a lot more kind of like organic fold, like chunks in it, and it's more shaped to fit into the inside of your ear. Whereas here on the Defiant, like it's just kind of flat and slabby on the sides, which just means that as it fits into your ear, there's not a whole lot of grip on the inside of my ear, which I guess I should probably just show you. Let me throw this thing in my ear, give you a look at the Defiant. And you can see that the shell size is, I would say, you know, fairly medium size. Like it's not very large. I think this should fit most people comfortably, and because it's, you know, a typical resin shell, it's all smooth around the edges. You're not going to have any issues with sharp edges or anything like that touching you, and that's all good. But here's what I was kind of mentioning is like, you know, typically you've got like these folds in your ears, right? Which you got like this little nubbin down here, we call it antitragus. You got this little fold back here. I'm going to call it the helix or something like that. And for me, the best fitting semi-custom designs will have molds in the plastic that fit into and lock in there and give you a really nice bit of security. But with this design, like it fits in comfortably. It just doesn't fit in super securely. Most of the security is in fact coming from the nozzle basically gripping my ear with the via the ear tip. So you're going to have to spend some time finding the right ear tip to get the most stable fit. But once you do, it's nice and stable. One thing I will say is that the nozzle is a little bit on the long side. I guess for that, we can go back to the table and I can actually pull out my calipers to measure this nozzle exactly. But yeah, I do find the nozzle to be a little bit on the long side. And because of that, having a shorter ear tip for me works pretty well. So let me give this, yeah, it's like a 6mm nozzle. So not too gnarly, but because of the length, it might end up being more of an issue for you than you might expect of a typical 6mm. There you go, just kind of see it from the top down. Now, on the topic of tips, you might notice that I am not using the stock ear tips. The stock ear tips seemed fine, but I've just had a lot of luck lately with these Dunu candy ear tips, so it's kind of been a go-to for me, and I like them because they work pretty well in terms of like being a little bit on the short side, but also having a nice kind of round ball and socket type fit in my ear, which is something that happens to work pretty well for a shape of this type. Okay. Anything else to talk about physical form factor? Probably not. Let me just check my notes real quick to make sure. I don't have anything else to say. So we're going to talk about the sound here on the Juzear Defiant. And to do so, we're going to go to SquigLink. Frequency response is up on SquigLink right now. If you want to check it out for yourself, I'll have it linked in the description down below. You can compare it to a bunch of other IMs, literally hundreds of other IMs, and see how it might stack up if your Squigcraft is good enough. But if it's not, let's do a little bit of analysis here together. So what I kind of expect from a Zeos collab, right? If Zeos is tuning something, I'm expecting a lot of bass. And there is actually a fair bit of bass here in the Defiant. You can see this is quite a bit bass boosted. You can see this lighter dotted line here is like the Harman target. So this has got more bass than Harman target, but it's not just like in the sub bass area. It's also here through kind of like the lower mid range where the Harman target is often criticized as being a little bit on the thin and kind of weightless side. There's a little bit of extra emphasis here on the Defiant. And I think that that does come through in the listening impressions. Like it is a warmer, less thin sound than Harman, but it is still very much a sub bass focus bass boost, okay? And then here in the mid-range, you do get a little bit of thinness. You get this contrastiness. And then I would say that the vocal area, kind of this upper mid-range section, is actually pretty well tuned. And the treble is also surprisingly well tuned. What's interesting though is versus what I see here in the graph, I do hear this a little bit brighter than what it looks, because it almost looks like it's a little bit on the dark side. But I do hear this as very much a V-shaped sound signature, but like a really tasteful V-shaped sound signature. So you've got this bass boost, you've got this like pretty nice, clean treble extension, and overall, that's kind of what defines the sound here on the Juzear. So my overall impressions is that the bass is actually really tight on this set. Like it's got a nice attack, a nice impact, even though it is more emphasized than what you would get on Harman tune. I don't hear the bass on this as being like bloated or slow or smeary. It's actually got pretty nice texture in the sub bass. Like if you're listening, if you're trying to follow like a bass guitar tone, you can follow it really, really well with a set like this. And because the bass is so clean, like the top end ends up also being quite clean. It's, like I mentioned, a little bit brighter than it looks, I think, on the frequency response graph. It does have, to my ear, some emphasis in kind of like the presence region, which is like the lower treble, which gives a little bit of an edginess to vocals, but also helps with transients. And again, that attack on instruments just gets like a nice extra little bit of bite without being particularly sharp or strident. I didn't hear the Defiant as sibilant really at all, which is actually pretty nice. And yeah, just that overall, that contrasty sound signature that I'm describing. Again, kind of a V-shaped sound signature. You've got that bass emphasis, you've got some of this kind of like lower treble emphasis, and somewhat of a relaxed normal mid-range. Gives it just this overall contrasty sound that also gives it pretty nice imaging. Like the imaging on this set is surprisingly good for the amount of bass that you get, and especially at this price range. Usually when you're trading in this price range and you're looking for a lot of bass, you don't have a whole lot to pick from. It's like Mud City or like a little bit of bass. This one actually does a pretty good job of giving you quite a bit of bass without that Mud City, and I appreciate that. It can sound, if I'm getting critical, it can sound a little bit artificial, maybe a little plasticky. I think that, again, that lower treble emphasis does give it a little bit of an edginess to it that just makes it maybe more exciting and engaging rather than like rich and relaxed, depending on what your preference is. But frankly, I would say that this IM is surprisingly dang good, okay? But how good is it? Well, let me bring in another IM for comparison. And that other IM that I alluded to earlier is this, which is the Aful Explorer, aka the Performer 3. I don't know, is that what we're calling it? Is that what I'm calling it? I think I just made that up. But anyway, this is around 120, maybe 130 bucks. So it's more expensive than the Juzear. It's also got fewer drivers if you're counting the number of drivers. But in and around this price range, for me, if I'm looking for a bassy set, like this is what I would recommend. And it's another hybrid set that I do recommend in kind of this lower price range. But it's also interesting that while they're both like kind of bass forward in their tonalities, they do it pretty differently. And so I think some people are going to end up gravitating toward one or the other, but let's talk about exactly how they are different. I would say that the bass here on the Aful is more on the bloomy kind of soft side. Now, I generally think that the bass is actually pretty well controlled, but when you listen to it versus the Defiant, the bass on the Explorer is definitely softer in its attack. It's a little bit more, I don't know, kind of warm and like relaxed almost in its overall tonality. I think that's also partly to do, if not entirely to do, with the treble tuning, which is very much more relaxed here on the Explorer. It ends up giving the Explorer more of a mid-range focus, whereas this one, again, sounds more traditionally V-shaped. Again, a very nicely well-defined V-shaped sound signature. Whereas, again, the Explorer it ends up sounding more warm, relaxed, and kind of like laid back versus the very engaging sound here that we have on the Defiant. I would say that also I get a better sense of like that vocal texturing and stuff, whereas again, the Defiant can come across a little bit on the edgy side and a little bit overexcited and not quite natural in its timbre. I do feel like the Explorer does a better job of that, just again, being more relaxed and natural sounding. But I would say that really another benefit too of this contrasty sound is that the Defiant just comes across with stronger sense of imaging, right? So you're going to get a stronger sense of separation between sounds. The definition between instruments and like them all sounding like they're coming from distinct places in space is going to be more exaggerated here on the Defiant, whereas on the Explorer, it's more of like this kind of all-encompassing warm sound. What has decent imaging. So it's not to say like not to slag off the imaging here on the Explorer, but it's definitely not stand out here. Whereas here on the Defiant, I think it really is. So yeah, they're definitely both bassy sets. If you're looking for a bassy set around this price range, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these. But again, they are very different takes on that bassy. Do you want kind of an exciting, contrasty, nice imaging bassy set, or do you want something that's a little bit more warm and relaxed with a better sense of vocal texture and a little bit more mid-range body and warmth to it? Well, that's what I think we have here with the Explorer. I mean, if you want my take, I'm probably still going to go with the Explorer, but a lot of that's because, frankly, I find the Explorer like pretty unique in its tuning, and I have access to a lot of stuff, right? So I'm going to gravitate towards something that's more unique versus something that is really, really well executed, but frankly, at higher price points, I think that there are other things that I would probably pick over the Juzear. But if you only have $100, frankly, like this is a pretty difficult choice, and hopefully you get a chance to hear them both. But I think that will do it for my thoughts here on the Juzear Defiant. Out of 5 stars, I'm going to give this thing a very solid 4 stars out of 5. If you want to check it out, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube gel. What the heck did I just say? Ding the bell, because otherwise I'm going to do that again. And then join me on Discord, which I've also got linked in the description down below. And I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews, we now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get with the